Both teams lined up in a 4-2-3-1 on paper, and whereas Brazil's shape mostly stuck to this during the match, Uruguay's took on different formations depending on whether they were in possession or not. One of the traits of a Marcelo Bielsa team is their man-to-man pressing of the opposition. In this game, it was a trait that Brazil couldn't get out of. From Brazil's build-up, Pelestri joined Nunes in pressing the two Brazil centre-backs. De la Cruz and Valverde man-marked the Brazil holding midfielders very tightly, which would have prevented them from turning to face the pitch. But what it did more effectively was make Brazil completely ignore this option due to the risk of losing the ball in a key area. Alisson was free to pass the ball to a centre-back. The centre-back was then pressed by the attacker on the ball side, cutting off a pass back infield. Meanwhile, the other attacker dropped back to cover the space in midfield. Ugarte, who is marking the Brazil number 10 Paqueta, is joined by the fullback on the non-ball side to form a temporary double pivot. And together they shuffle across to cut out Brazil's only option of a pass down the line. With those midfield areas covered, this allows the Uruguay fullback to press the winger and win the ball back. Valverde constantly joined De la Cruz in man-marking the two Brazil pivots tightly, while Ugarte was given the role of protecting the centre-backs. His role again was key, as with the extra player in the centre, it allowed the fullbacks to press up on Rodrigo and Rafinha. This was an important part of the victory today, as it limited the wingers to just 5 successful dribbles between them. Brazil's response when they could hold the ball was to beat Bielsa's man-to-man press with rotations and combinations down the flanks. Brazil's holding midfielder formed a triangle with the fullback and the winger as they tried to overload Uruguay's flanks. This would see the fullback move into space behind the opposition's fullback. When Brazil were able to move down the pitch, they formed a 3-2 shape at the back, with Rodrigo moving infield. This gave room to the left back to advance. At this stage, Uruguay were defending in a 4-1-4-1. In this case, Pelestri tracked the fullback, but it did leave space for Rodrigo to combine with Endrick in the centre. However, aggressive pressing from Ugarte and the centre-back cut out this risk. This then could have seen the space open up in the centre, with a centre-back needing to cover this area. The problem for Brazil was that Uruguay's pressing was very aggressive and prevented the Brazilian player turning. All too often with options closer to the ball player, cut out by Uruguay's man marking, a longer, less accurate ball was played into the midfield by the free centre-back. Ugarte's positioning allowed a centre-back to press the attacker aggressively, as he knew his position would be covered by the PSG midfielder. There was a moment in the first half where this almost paid off. Endrick drops into the midfield and this attracts the attention of the Uruguay centre-back, who presses him. Ugarte is marking a player and doesn't fill in the space. This leaves a large gap in the middle of the defence for Rafinha to run into and get a shot away that is saved. Compared to Uruguay, Brazil were a lot more passive when it came to pressing, staying in their starting shape of 4-2-3-1. This shape sat in a mid-block, allowing Uruguay to push their fullbacks up the pitch level with the Brazil midfield. The two pivots, Valverde and Ugarte, staggered their positions with Ugarte the deeper of the two. This allowed Valverde to operate on the same line as De la Cruz and form a triangle on the flanks with the fullback and the winger. Uruguay operated with this on both sides in a 4-3-3. Shifting the ball between the two centre-backs opened up space to the side of Endrick to progress the ball into the midfield, usually by Araujo before his injury. Because Uruguay then overloaded the flanks with the fullback and the number 8, Brazil's formation morphed into a 4-5-1 to cover the width of the pitch and prevent Uruguay from playing through them. Pelestri's diagonal run infield takes the Brazil fullback with him, opening up space for his teammate to move into, but the pass didn't come this time. We saw that the time afforded to the centre-back allowed Uruguay to work their rotations on the flanks. The fullback could move closer to the winger, and with the number 8 taking up good positions, the fullback had passing options. And it was these combinations that allowed Uruguay to get behind Brazil's defence with smart combination play. As the ball is played to the winger, who is dragging the fullback with him, he is then able to play a pass to the number 8. Meanwhile, the Uruguay fullback has moved behind the Brazil defense. Bielsa's men stretched the pitch by using the space on the outside of Brazil's back four. This made sure that there was spaces between the back line and the midfield for the number 8s. The time given to the centre backs saw them hit the winger with long diagonal passes. By overloading one side of the pitch, it left 1 versus 1 on the other. Once the ball was played, the player was quickly supported by the fullback and number 8, hoping to get on the end of a loose ball. Again, with the presence of Ugarte, the centre backs could bring the ball into midfield, where they would have a direct angle to the flanks. This was the trigger for the winger to move inside into the half space and give space for the fullback to overlap. The winger was then found with a pass in the half space, where he was quickly joined by one of the attacking midfielders. The different approaches were very evident in this matchup, although in the end it was won on penalties.